This is going to be a comparison and contrast of ancient Athens and ancient Sparta around the 5th century. At the beginning of the 5th century, the Persian Wars were going on, and these were fought between 499 and 449 BC. Athens, Sparta, and other Greek city-states, which for context, a Greek city-state is just a community structure of ancient Greece. They were the local centers of power with an urban area and a countryside, and they were also referred to as polises, but Athens, Sparta, and other Greek city-states formed a strong alliance to defeat the Persian invaders, and after this conflict, Athens emerges as a central political force, and they bully and assert their dominance over other Greek city-states, and everyone is flourishing at this time. While both the Athenians and the Spartans spoke Greek, they used two different dialects. In Athens, the Attic dialect was used, and this was known as Classic Greek. It was the prestige dialect of the Greek world for centuries. It was used by Plato, it was used by Aristotle in a lot of Greek dramas. And then in Sparta, they spoke the Doric dialect, also known as West Greek, spoken by different semi-nomadic groups living around the Pindus Mountains, and it's in some forms of poetry, but overall it has meager representation compared to the Attic dialect. So an example of Attic dialect in Greek poetry would be the story of Oedipus, which was written by Sophocles in 420 BC. Oedipus is a tragic hero. Despite his innocence, he can't escape his fate. He's doomed from the start. Despite his parents moving him far away, he eventually returns to his homeland, unknowingly kills his father, and gets with his mother. So despite his innocence, he cannot escape his predestined fate. Athens was much more luxurious and rich with their architecture. They had the Parthenon, which is the purest expression of classic Greek temple architecture to date. They had a patchwork of different buildings, very congested layout. They had a walled city. They had temples, theaters, stadiums, bathhouses, public recreation areas, lots of buildings, just luxurious lifestyle. Whereas Sparta was a lot more simple. They built what was necessary to survive, free-flowing, unconstrained layout. They had farmhouses. They had public barracks for the military. They had the ancient theater of Sparta, which was pretty large, but other than that, they were much more simple and had just basic amenities. The Parthenon is a pretty well-known Greek building. It was a former temple in the center of the Athenian Acropolis. It was dedicated to Athena herself. It was the chief shrine of Athena, and it functionally was the treasury of the Delian League, which is a confederacy of Greek city-states where Athens was the leader. The diets and dining practices of Athens and Sparta were very different. Athens was very prosperous. They traded a lot. They ate delicious meals. They enjoyed quite a lot of fish, legumes. They had pork and veal. They ate fresh fruits and vegetables that were local to their region, and they indulged in olive oil, considering it a gift from Athena herself. They also seasoned their food with herbs and spices, and they believed that food was an experience to indulge your palate with rather than to fill your belly, whereas the Spartans ate what was necessary and what helped them survive. So they would eat pork and lamb. They didn't eat that much fish. For special occasions, they might have pita bread and some boiled pork, and of course, their soldiers ate infamous black broth, but Spartan diet was very plain, and it was accustomed for military life. Here is the infamous black broth, which was fed to Spartan soldiers during training and during war. It was just boiled pork meat, blood, oats, vinegar, and salt, and it helped emphasize the concept of idealism in ancient Greece, which was idealizing beauty in the human body. Physical beauty equated to mental beauty, and so for the Spartans, physical toughness meant mental toughness. So if they could eat this nasty, disgusting food, they were pretty mentally tough and very equipped for battle. So Athens and Sparta were both strong, respected military forces, although Sparta was much more intense than Athens in that world. Sparta's entire culture was based off their military. Although Athens wanted good soldiers, once their boys turned 18, They had 2 years of military service and they were done, unless, of course, there was war in which older men would be brought back into service, but only as needed. Athens had a pretty strong navy, and as for a military culture, they wanted strong young men, but it wasn't nearly as intense as Sparta. But they did introduce Athenian boys to the story of the Iliad, which just inspired them to be a good soldier. And the Iliad just kind of explored themes of glory and fate and homecoming, just taught these young boys what they should be doing. But in Sparta, they took these young boys away from their family at age 7. They had a state-sponsored military training, a state-sponsored education. A lot of corporal punishment was implemented, and these boys were given meager rations. They were taught to fight over their food, to steal from others, become thrifty, and just get used to not eating and harsh conditions. And once they were teenagers, they could be selected for the Cryptia, which was a secret police force which took good leaders that they were seeing as these boys were getting older and let them hassle the lower classes of Sparta, and if they found people that they deemed troublemakers, they had full authority and right to execute them. Once Spartan men turned 20, they became full-time soldiers until age 60, so the military was a career. That was their entire life as a male, was to fight for Sparta. And the Spartans liked arete, which is excellence in any form, but they specify their excellence in the male body and masculinity. Our military uniform was designed to be recognizable. It was designed to scare their enemies. They carried spears, shields, they often had long hair, and they were well known for their red capes, which were worn to cover blood up from wounds that they were sustaining during combat. The government of Athens and Sparta were different. Athens had the first democracy the world had ever seen, in which the citizens directly control the political process. They actively served in institutions that governed them. And of course, only male citizens of Athens could be part of this process, but it was a democracy nonetheless. They were very proud of their free speech, in which these eligible citizens could go to the assemblies and speak their mind about whatever they pleased, and when there were votes, they had 9 elected presidents who assessed these votes. Whereas in Sparta, they had a dual monarchy, 28 elders, which were recruited from the aristocratic Spartan class. They limited the powers of the king, and then there were the ephors, who were the 5 annually elected citizen leaders that could arrest elders and kings if they deemed fit. The kings did have majority power, but there were power checks involved. Socrates was an Athenian citizen. He was very critical of the Athenian government, and he challenged the corrupt politicians using free speech, which ultimately led to his demise. And he actually praised the Spartan monarchy because he believed that it was less corrupt than the democracy. The social hierarchy of Athens and Sparta were similar in the regards that the citizens of the respective city-states were at the top of the social class. So in Athens, the upper class was known as citizens, and these people had Athenian parents. They were rich and powerful. They held all the power in the city and controlled the wealth. Beneath them was the middle class, known as the metics. And these people had the potential to be wealthy, but they could not own land. They were foreigners, but they did have the same rights as citizens, minus the option to participate in the political process. Below them, it was just called the lower class. They were free people who formerly were slaves, and they had some legal protections. And then at the very, very bottom were the slaves, who had no legal rights or benefits and were treated as property, even though they did most of the work. In Sparta, the top of the ladder was the Spartans. These are free men who fought and trained their whole lives for the Spartan military. And then there's the Perioeci, which were beneath the Spartans. They were often foreigners, and they were traders and craftsmen who made equipment for the Spartans. They did pay taxes, and they could serve in the Spartan army, but they were not necessarily required to do so. Below them were the Helots. They weren't slaves, they were state laborers, and they did all the back work required for Sparta to run. Both Athens and Sparta believed in anthropocentrism, which is the idea or the value that humans are the center of all, and any and every being beneath the humans are means for humans to survive and to flourish and succeed. So humans are at the top, and Sparta and Athens both agreed on this.